And hello, we are live, and I'd like to welcome Master Heebs, right, Scott Hebert here, to chat with us tonight. When I initially started this this Twitch thing, part of it was just my way because I wasn't going to conferences and I wasn't getting out a lot in the spring, and there were people that I had never met but I knew on Twitter or I knew on from YouTube or Facebook and different places. And so this was started as my personal quest to just talk to people I wanted to talk to. So like Scott, you're one of those people that like I would see on Twitter all the time talking about gamification, and I can only get to know your personality so much and have so much of what you bring to the table with gamification through Twitter or through your videos. Right. And so having an actual conversation is just so much better than Twitter.
Yeah, no, I agree for sure.
Oh yeah. And so, I watched your TED talk that you did. That was, awesome on gamification. As well as I've, watched, a lot of your YouTube stuff. And, I think in the gamification circles for education especially, you're most known for your three-dimensional game boards that you make with your students, right? And you had like the characters, you move them around and stuff. So I think that's something distinctly unique that you do that I don't know of anyone else really that does it quite like that. I know a lot of people that use maps. That's very common. But as far as like huge dioramas and three-dimensional pieces, that's just that's nuts. Do you ever think to yourself, that's nuts still?
Do I? Yeah, I think everything I do is nuts, I guess. If you really were to look at it, it's one of those things where it just seemed to fit something that I wanted to do in terms of the progress I wanted to make in the game. And I knew that saying, you're part of this medieval world and this engagement thing that I'm just going for, and, where these characters, I was like, try to give them an outlet in which to, I guess, for lack of a better term, bring it to life for them to, I can't walk them through ruins of a smashed building, but I can easily learn how to make a little model of one, and kids really become captivated by it because I think in the world we live in today, everything's tech-based. So when you are able to shift to actual tactile moving of things, you see a huge shift in the kids' thinking and appreciation of it because they're actually doing something as opposed to just something that when they're done, it can just go in their pocket. They'll never have to look at it again if they don't want to.
Mm-hmm. And they're reminded of the progress they made the day before immediately when they come into the room, and they can see where they're at. That's kind of the idea.
Yeah, you could say that for sure. Like it's a visual tracker of the progress that they're making, as well as a way to show the progress everybody else is making. So you are aware if your group slacks off a bit or chooses not to undertake extra things or whatever, which a lot of my stuff I do is optional. Then they have the ability to go in and then see that they're falling behind. It's like watching a 100-meter dash, right? Except you're only allowed to run a few meters a day, and then you can see how quickly someone else is going ahead of you.
Yep. And so a lot of, I was thinking about like myself and how I teach and how much that had to change when everything came down in the spring. How much of that have you had to change it? How did you do it? How did you change that from the game board to be able to do it, either hybrid or remote? So what's going on with you now?
Well, actually, interestingly enough, so in the spring, like most teachers around North America, it just kind of shifted into this survival mode of our government kind of made the incorrect message, I would say, and said that everyone's past and school's essentially over was the undertone of the message. So attendance and stuff was really tricky to get kids to come back because the underlying message was, you don't have to, let's just get through this. And so for the kids who showed up, what I tried to do is I tried to create this kind of scenario where we would do virtual game shows. I would use things like Snap Camera to do like goofy filters in different scenarios. I would do virtual. I think on my YouTube channel, I explain how I use PowerPoint to make a virtual game board, and kind of like a situational thing, like exploring a broken down house or something where like there's fog of war, essentially like a video game. So, you interact and unlock certain elements and things like that. So it's kind of how I had to shift it. And I'm immunocompromised, so I wasn't actually allowed to go back into class on start of September. So I've been a full-fledged virtual teacher now for our division's remote learning school. And because we have kids that come in and come out depending on the status of their areas, their own health things, their own COVID things, I was kind of asked to not do too much of the game-based stuff and like the stories and boards and things, because if kids come in and kids come out, the amount of catch up and explaining that's going to have to happen. And then if they transition back into a regular classroom, it becomes really difficult for the teachers that get them, because it's like, what did you cover? How did you cover it? What is this game board? What are these cards? So it was kind of just asked to focus more on one-shot stuff versus the year-long thing, which was tough for me in the beginning because I've been a pretty vocal proponent of changing school for a really long time on Twitter. Proponent of taking what I believe is like the industrial style of school, the sit down, shut up, do what we say, tell me what I said back to you, great, you're super smart, like that model of education. And so I had to figure out a way to then still do what I wanted to do on the premise of keeping it fun and exciting. So yeah, I've reverted back to like virtual game shows, to using online tools like GimKit or BlueKit, which if you have not tried BlueKit, or any teachers watching this have not tried BlueKit, do it. It might be the single greatest review game I've ever used. That and GimKit they're designed by high school kids, and they're two companies that are growing exponentially, and they have extremely small creation team to keep it fluid, receptive. They're not about money. They're incredible. They're games that they design for kids. So I've been focusing on more the one-off stuff like that versus the year-long thing, which again is a bummer for me because I prefer the year-long thing where I can walk in a costume and challenge kids and break stuff and throw things at them and just see what they do in these different scenarios and challenges. So that's been tricky, but I've been figuring out ways to do it online while still meeting the kind of goals the school has set out. So
right. And I think myself included, because I'm with you there, as far as like I was just about to get to almost like no grades, right? I was trying almost to that area where I was just going to be looking at standards and not grading almost anything, as little as possible. And I was almost there, and then this happened, and it's like, well, I had to take a step back, because then all of a sudden it's like, okay, how am I going to explain this to the kids when I don't always see the kids? It's kind of that thing. It's hard enough when you're in class trying to get buy-in from students as far as how you grade, because they're kind of like, they've been trained. I teach mainly 8th grade, and even by then in 8th grade, they're trained to think a certain way. And it would take a good 3 or 4 months of the school year just to get them to think, oh, it's about learning, not about grades. Oh, okay. But with this, it just made like things really, challenging. I definitely get that. And I'm with you as far as like the games like GimKit. And I do a Kahoot every day. It's like I play games for half the period, at least. And then we integrate the reading and writing and everything else. But and sometimes I like pinch myself. I'm like, am I doing this right? That I'm like just having fun for and we have block now, so it's an hour and a half class. I like just played games with kids for an hour. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's good. Like, I can sleep at night. I actually feel really good, and like I like what you said about GimKit, where their turnaround was fast. Think about how fast they put out the Among Us, version of it. I mean, that's like crazy for a company to just kind of be like, yeah, let's make a version of the game and do this.
Well, considering that there are 3 essentially programmers that do it, and I helped Josh, who's the creator of GimKit. We bounced ideas back and forth initially, so I kind of helped him design that a little bit. So I'm super proud of the work that he does, and I've told him time and time again when I spoke to him from a teaching perspective, I think what left a really sour taste in my mouth during the pandemic when it was going on in March to August was that ed tech companies tried to come in like heroes, and they were like, hey, your stuff is free now, try it, get you know, blah blah blah. And then the lock was put back on the box.
It was a bait and switch.
And all these correct. And now they're like, hey, you just spent 5 months building content, curating content, sharing content, oh, that's all premium now. And they're like, well, our school boards are losing money, sub budgets are exploding, we have everything going to hell in a handbasket in certain areas, and now you want us to pay money to get what we've created, essentially, because that's now premium. And that kind of stuff irks me a lot, because it's the view that the education system is this endless pool of money. And that's why I have immense respect for Josh at GimKit and for his name's Ben at BlueKit. And again, that's a tool again I highly recommend, because they were two kids who found errors in Kahoot that they didn't like, and they each created a tool that address those issues in their eyes, and have created tools that are far more engaging. And what more could you want the education system to produce as kids than now two people who are 20 years and under, who have created some of the most user-friendly, kid addicting, I guess, like kids love these games, right? And responsive companies, and they're 20 under 21 or under, if I'm not mistaken. I think Ben is 19 from BlueKit, and I think Josh may be 20. So I mean, what more could you want? Like, that's what the school system is, and that's what the school system should produce, right? And that's why I'm just such a huge
produced
proponent.
As a result of faults within the school system.
Yeah, exactly. That's how gamification came to be, right? Like, the people who've kind of done the initial parts of movements of gamification were the people who were fine with, you know, I always tell the story that when I first started putting my stuff on Twitter 6 years ago, I got lambasted by teachers on Twitter. Like, and I have a little folder on my computer of some of the tweets I kept that just kind of motivate me, where, because this is, I'm assuming, a PG-13 channel, I won't say things that were told to me, but I was told everything you could possibly imagine by teachers. When you look at their profiles, you know, I'm a teacher from this place, I'm a teacher from here. And it's this fear that we have in education that if we don't have kids sitting down, reading books and filling out worksheets, then the whole world will fail. And the most successful people on the planet have been ones that have said, I succeeded in spite of school, not because of it. And I think that's a really powerful message to remind people, is that the school, like, you can we rethink tech all the time. What could tech do? Vehicles, even as simple as like, how could an oven cook, or how can a fridge keep things cold, or be more energy efficient? But when anyone takes an advancement in education, everyone looks at it with this crooked eye of like, oh, well, what's going to happen to the future? What's going to happen to the kids? You know, even right now, the kids are going to be so messed up because of it. No, they're not. The kids are going to be fine. This is what it is. The whole world is in the same situation. And I think that this worry that virtual school has to look identical to in-class learning is just so crazy.
And I think that there is a fear amongst, you know, because we both talked about kind of regressing already ourselves, that once this is all over, any good that we've found as teachers we'll just go back to the way it was like 5 years ago. And, you know, it's like, right, any progress we made towards, you know, getting rid of grades, or you know, making classes more fun and engaging, is just going to be lost to, you know, everyone regressing back to what it was before. And yeah, it's kind of a fear I have. You know, and it's something I'm cognizant of myself. So I'm hoping that I can avoid those pitfalls, as I'm sure you are as well. You're like, okay, when I go back to school, am I just going to be able to pick up right away with the gamification I had been doing before?
That's my goal. My goal is to go full bore back into it, just because I think that that's what we're going to need. The last thing kids are going to need when they finally get a sense of normal, with no masks in school, and, you know, no separate recesses and stretched out lunches and all these things that I hear going on in schools, you know, from colleagues and just reading social media and stuff. I think kids are not going to want the basics. They're going to want stuff that re-engages them, because the level of engagement in school right now is just dropping, generally speaking, for kids, because they're so tired of looking at the screen. They're so tired of feeling like they're not getting the help that they need, because the teacher can only do so much from a computer screen, or their parents might not be able to help them because they don't understand advanced physics or whatever the case may be. So like, I want to go full bore. Like, I can't wait to finally be back in the class with some sort of sense of normal, and get the game boards back and get the characters with their cards. I've got an app built for my program. I'm ready to get that unleashed and just get kids back into kind of the engagement, the exciting part about wanting to go back to school, without all of the essentially the things that they're stuck with now, that the whole world is stuck with. So
I hear that in students a lot, and it's I always try to give kids that option, because I do hybrid, so I have some kids in class, some are out of class, so it's pretty much just chaos, which is okay. I'm used to it. But when the kids are in class, I try to give them something hands-on. It's like, get off the screen, right? Or at least, even if we're doing something on the screen, I'll give them a piece of paper to write on, after I disinfect it, of course, and I hand it from really far away or whatever. But just so they have that kinesthetic piece to go with, something that's on the screen. But that's also really hard to do for teachers. And I know, and we'll talk a little bit about just strict gamification. And I do like a teacher group on gamification as part of the New York State Master Teacher Program. And the questions I get are the same ones you get about it, including how doesn't it require so much more time and effort to gamify your class? I barely have enough time to grade. How do I also, do all this other stuff? And I'm just interested to know what your response is to those kinds of questions.
Oh, for sure. The first one, if anyone tells me, when am I going to have time? All I do is grade. My first thing is, well, are you assessing too much? Because that's something that I feel like happens to a lot of educators, and that we will assess too much for the sake of assessing, to say, look at all these things that I assess. Look, I got this assessment, that assessment, but what is the actual assessment producing? Is it showing that the kids can just say everything that you said back? So I always say, well, if you feel like you're assessing too much and that's preventing you from doing anything, number one, you need to make your assessments just more pure and more concrete. And what are you actually trying to? So one high quality piece of assessment is a lot better than saying I have 5 pieces on a kid, when 4 of them are technically useless or just filler. The second thing I tell people is, you're not going to gamify on day one of teaching, on day one of being a teacher, because you got to understand the career, you got to understand the job, you got to understand the curriculum, your kids, the whole bit. After you have a couple of years of experience of education, gamification is super easy. I always like it to a cake with icing and no icing. The kid's going to come into your class. If you give a kid a piece of cake, the kid's going to eat the cake and he's going to be fine eating the cake. He didn't care. We all like cake. The difference is, if you present the cake with no icing and the cake with icing and sprinkles and candles and all the bells and whistles, the kids are automatically going to be, well, that one looks a little bit better. So the idea is, you take what you have and you just begin to add layers to it. You begin to add story to it. You begin to add narrative or purpose to it, right? And as you begin to work your way through those simple things, you create a gamified environment really, really quickly. It seems daunting, but once you have a story and a narrative, everything begins to flow, because everything connects to that. It's like the trunk of the tree, and then everything else offshoot is the branches. So when people are like, wow, how do you do this or how do you do that for your program? I'm like, that's a representation of now 7 years of figuring it out. So year one, I just had stories and characters and quests. I had some game cards. Then I figured out the battle board, which is that 3D gaming board you were talking about. That took years to build and implement and figure out properly. And it always makes me laugh, because I think there's a lot of hypocrisy in education where we expect kids and teachers, we expect kids to do all these creative, out of the box, like do more than that, dig deeper, all these things that we tell them. And then when you ask a teacher to do it, a lot of them get their back up and they're like, whoa, how am I supposed to figure that out? And we talk about failure, and we're like, kids need to fail, first attempt in learning, and all these acronyms I'm not a big fan of, all these things. And I just look at it and I say, you know what? When have you ever failed in front of the class? When have you ever, I will intentionally do a lesson in September randomly, whether it's I screw up a science lab or I miscalculate and present to them wrong numbers and whatever, and just show them that it's okay to make mistakes. Like I'll tell kids, I'm like, okay, we're going to try a new activity today. I have no idea if it's going to work. I've never tried this. And if it flops, who cares? And then if it flops, I said, okay, here's your assignment. Just tell me what would make it better. And then it's that creative thing. It's just a really simple things. We have this, I think education is the ultimate overcomplicating career. A lot of people will just overcomplicate the hell out of things just to make sure that they can justify every single box, every single tick that they have to do, every I they got to dot, every T that they got to cross. When in reality, when I stripped all that away and I said, okay, we're gonna have some fun today. You want to learn what viscosity is? Okay, we'll figure out the least viscous liquid to go through that pump, because if you don't, then that city's going to go on fire. And then I put rubbing alcohol in the pool of things that they have to look through. And then they find out that rubbing alcohol, my trap is that rubbing alcohol is the least viscous of all the liquids I provide, no matter what combination that they pick. Well, if you tell me that the least viscous liquid through the pump is rubbing alcohol, you just made a flamethrower and you burnt down the whole city. So then the kids have to realize that it's that critical thinking. It's that deeper level that I realized is really what the ultimate goal of education should be. Because I don't care if you remember what happened in my class and can memorize the information. What I found is that if I switch the wording in the information, a lot of kids will make the accusation that I didn't teach that. And I'm like, well, I did. I just changed the way that I presented it to you, and now you're lost, which means that you never understood it. You could just regurgitate it back to me, which in reality is that what we want the school system to do.
Yep. And, another thing that I usually tell teachers at the beginning is that they probably have already gamified someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like anytime you have a reward system in your class, it is a very simple version of gamification.
Mm-hmm.
And all you need to do is add a story to it, and you can then take it to the next level. So instead of it just being punitive, which is, a problem with, some gamification I see, then it becomes more of a storytelling element. Whether it's, hey, we're going to save up XP for some event or gold for some event. That's the same thing as what you used to do when you put marbles in the jar until you get a pizza party, right? I think most teachers have some experience with it. Maybe they were in a karate class and they had a belt system. It's essentially, it's somewhat of a gamified process. So that's the easy way in, right? There's a low bar there if you just enter it that way, right? Or you have your reward system for your credit card, right? It's gamified, right? You got your Starbucks card, you can earn points, right? And we can just take it as teachers to that next level, add a story to it, add a little bit more engagement to it, and you're already there. And I think that lowers the bar for a lot of teachers when they realize it's something they've already experienced and they've already done.
I think a lot of the fear too comes from the word gamification, because there's this negative connotation to gaming, that gaming produces no results. And it's like, actually, when you look at everything that's not a human being, they learn by play. They don't have a choice. There's no school for dolphins and there's no school for wolves. Like, they learn by doing things, by playing, by play fighting, whatever the case may be, they learn by doing. And I think that we have this weird view of education that learning by doing and having fun while doing it is the antithesis of learning. So people look at it and they're like, they'll walk by my class or they'll see a video of my class and go, how the hell does you dressed up as a king running around a field, kids helping villagers teach them about science? I'm like, well, that villager needs help with the concept of density, but I didn't say it. And that concept over there is viscosity, and that one's buoyancy, and that one's STEM. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, okay, well, here's what they're solving. Here's the problems that they're doing to help these people. And they're, oh, I didn't know that. So I think when you hear gamification, immediately people go, oh, you just give the kids a game to play, and then well, so lazy, or all these negative connotations that come with it. But I've had this huge goal of mine to continue to shake that idea that that's not what it is. The whole principle, the whole concept behind it is deep learning. And when you can get to that, you've achieved kind of the goal of gamification. Because where it fails, like you said, is you can only give so many marbles in a jar. You can only give so many stickers on a chart. You can only give so many badges before it doesn't matter. So you have to have something else. What does that lead to? What can they be used with? What can you do with them? Like, it's just, those are the next level kind of things, right? Like, token economy isn't gamification. Token economy is an element of gamification, just like saying your classroom is a story isn't gamification. And that's where I think the misconception comes from a lot of people, is that it's super diverse and it's super deep, but the issue is we don't experience it when we hear the name or see one video, which is why it's one of those challenges that I have for teachers, is get out of your comfort zone and try something, see what the results are, and then plan to go further with it in the next kind of logical step that comes with whatever, form of gamification you're trying or starting with.
Mm-hmm. I think teachers also have that misconception where if you do gamification in your classroom, that it's a game that lasts all year. I've had teachers come to me and say that, well, I can't do this for the whole year. And I have to remind them that you can just gamify one lesson, right? You can just take one thing that you already do, overlay the game on top of it, and maybe have it be, one period or a week or whatever, but you can, gamify parts of that and then see how that works and then work from there. See how the kids react, see how you react to it and how well you handle that. So is that something you tell teachers as well, to kind of start small?
All the time. Yeah. Like when I first started, I said the joke is, I said, okay, we're going to do this. I'm going year long. And I created all this content that to me would have lasted about 2 months. So I'm like, okay, I've got enough time to dig around and make progress. And then all of a sudden I was at the end of September and the kids were done everything. And I was like, okay, this is both great, but also terrifying, because I've created something where kids are loving it, but now it's forcing me to pace myself better. And it's forcing me to realize that I wasn't ready for what I was planning on doing. So when I go do presentations, and I have a full 3.5 hour 101 of gamification on my YouTube channel, I live streamed one at the beginning of the pandemic in March. But one of the things I tell teachers is there's 3 ways to gamify. You can gamify a lesson, you can gamify a unit, or you can gamify the year. And I said, of course, the logical progression is to start with gamifying one element or one lesson. And one of my favorite things to do is to just become really good at lying. And you go in your class on a Monday and you write the number 4 on the board, and then you leave and you come in a little bit later with the kids. And then the kids look and they're like, oh, I wonder what that is. And they come around and they're like, I walk in and I'm like, who wrote the 4 on the board? And I play it up like it wasn't me. And then I erase it. And then the next day there's a 3 and a 2. And then the kids eventually realize that there's a countdown. I swear up and down it isn't me. I blame some kids that I know can take it. I poke and prod. And then when they show up on Friday, there's something with a black cloth and a question mark on it covered in the front of the room. We all don't know what it is. It's this mystery, this aura of what could it be? And that ends up just being a game. But the whole week has led up to Friday, and there's not one kid that's missing Friday. And just little tiny elements like that work. I helped. Then the next logical step is I helped a unit for a kindergarten teacher, and people are like, how the heck do you gamify for kindergarten? I'm like, are you kidding? Like,
how do you not?
Kindergarten,
right?
Exactly, right? That's what kindergarten is. So I was like, what do kids know that you like? And she's like, oh, this coffee mug, I always have it. The kids always ask me about it. I'm like, okay, well, that's missing on Monday. You don't know where it is. Find a teacher that's going to have taken it in the end. So the principal agreed to take it. And so then all these clues started to show up. And as the clues started to show up, they were all tied to the lesson. So they were like a ransom note that she made, but the words were the sight words or word wall words were emphasized. So she was teaching them the meaning of the words and how to spell them. And then the math was clues leading to room numbers and eliminating teachers from the school and all these different kinds of things. And the kids all figured it out, and it led to the day that they were going to storm what they believed was the room, which was ultimately the principal's office. And so they all dressed up in like little detectives or whatever they did. And they literally just sat there and like all ready to go, and outside the door, and they kick open the principal's door, and the principal's in a swivel chair, and he swivels around and he's got the mug in his hand, and he's like, oh, you guys caught me. How'd you figure it out? And she's like, that whole 2-week span, there was nothing that I couldn't get those kids to do that they weren't also super excited to do. And she's like, they would be at recess and find like a random stick and they're like, this is a clue, this is a clue. And like just everything became so captivating. And that's the simplicity of gamification, is that you just have to get kids to believe what you're saying. You got to be that car salesman, as they say. But when you do that, you can get kids to do anything. And I heard you mention you teach 8th grade. That's what I teach. And people are like, are you kidding me? Like, that's literally all it takes to get kids hooked. Well, you do grade 8. Is that the same with grade 8? And I'm like, yeah, it's really easy, because the other option is sit down and do the work from the workbook. So of course the plain difference and the novelty of it will turn, and kids will be like, yeah, I'll give that a go. Why not?
Yeah, I had the same thought, Psyche, and I was like, what? I'm like, the image of those kindergartners kicking down the door, that's priceless.
I wish I would have seen it. It sounded so funny.
It's funny. I mean, part of it, and it works for any age, because that's also what any good TV series, that's what that cliffhanger ending is, right? Mm-hmm. You're holding something back so that there's that anticipation of what's going to come next. And that's the part of good storytelling. There's something that you don't know that you have to feed in. And that's, our new standards, the next generation science standards, is all part of like, phenomena discovery and looking in and finding out how a phenomena works. And a lot of it is holding back and not telling a kid how a phenomena works. It's like you show them a video or a demonstration and they're like, oh, how'd that work? What happened? And you're like, I don't know. Tell me. Versus back in the day, you would be like, here's a demonstration. Here's how it works. This blah, 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 blah. And you lose them. All right, they're done. They're just kind of like, you maybe had them for 15 seconds during the demonstration itself, and then they're off in la la land because you're just yapping. Whereas, if you give them a chance to just ask questions, like they'll ask 1,000 questions and engage in a discussion, and then you can get them to argue about which one's the better idea and all of that. Even if they don't come to the right answer, as far as what causes a phenomena, they're primed to have that knowledge when it comes time for them to learn it.
But see, it's really funny that you mention that, because if you were to ask any kid I've taught in the last 6 years, they would say that the number one thing I say is, I don't know. Yep. Because I started realizing that I would literally be like, here's the assignment, and it wouldn't be out of my hand, or like, what do I do? And I'm like, you haven't even looked at it. You legitimately don't know what to do because you haven't asked. And the interesting part to me that I found is that I do what's called the yellow brick road phenomena, which is I present the task with the goal at the end, but I don't pave the yellow brick road, because what I find is too many kids expect me, like I don't even give examples anymore, because I used to get really frustrated where I give an example and then the work is the example. And I'm like, no, that was the example. You don't give me what I told you as the example, as the assignment. And they're like, well, I didn't know what else to do. So I'm like, when I give a task, it can be done in any way that they want. They can sing, they can dance, they can make presentations, they can film commercials, they can do whatever they want. I don't care, because it's not my job to tell a kid how to learn. It's my job to teach a kid what learning is. So I've had kids teach about Wimmis symbols through interpretive dance, because the group of kids that did this project were huge, passionate dancers. So they came up with this interpretive, weird dance to really funky music about like, this is flammable and toxic, and they're doing all these like weird things. I don't have a clue what's happening. But when you look back at it, you're like, they understood everything. And then when you assess them on it, they knew all the symbols, they knew all the meanings, they knew all the standards. And that wouldn't have happened if I would have said, here's the worksheet, label everyone, connect a line with the name, blah, 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 because that would have just been what everybody else does. But they got their way to infuse their passions. Like I have a hall of fame in my classroom where I keep work that just blows me away. And like some of the stuff that I've received has been, there's no way to describe it. like what kids have come up with when they're not given constraint. But what I did learn as a tip to anybody who's watching is that creativity comes with constraint. So when you say do anything, you get frozen by choice. But when you say do anything and it just has to have Lego in it, then kids will figure out a way, because now they have a base in which to build the foundation of their project on. So when I write my quest, I try to create kind of like, this is what has to happen. And then I don't care how you do it. I don't care how you save the city from fire. I don't care how you defeat this monster. I don't care how you prove this theory is true or untrue. Is all right. This is what has to happen. You are the controller of how it works. And I find that when kids feel trusted and feel like there is some autonomy there, you will get incredible things out of them.
Yep. Psych Queen had a great question. It's like, how do you get admin on board? I know I have the luxury of being the only 8th grade science teacher in my district, and none of my admin are science people, so they have no clue how it's supposed to be taught. So I can basically do whatever I want. So I'm given a lot of freedom in that way. But there are some districts that have a set curriculum that everyone has to follow. What's been your experience with admin and trying to get buy-in from admin?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's a question I get a lot. So the one thing that I'd really tell people is that curriculum, the artistry of teaching, is that curriculum just says what has to be taught. It doesn't say how it must be taught. And that's one thing that really needs to be discerned in education, is that curriculum is just the content. How the content is presented there's no restriction to how a teacher is allowed to present anything, as long as in the end the kids cross the proverbial finish line. So when I presented this idea to my original admin 6 years ago, I got the classic like, well, are kids going to learn? And I said, all I want you to do is leave me alone for 30 days. I said, that's it. I said, you've been a principal for 29 years. You know what an engaged classroom looks like. That's all I ask. Just get out of my way. And I said, if you don't like it, or if you get complaints from parents, or if I come in crying one day and I'm like, I blew it, like the kids are falling behind, everything gets reset on October 1st. And we go back to the default that you're comfortable with. But I said, for 30 days, I need you to get out of my way and trust me. And the admin at the time was like, you know what? I can respect that. I trust you. And that's all I needed to hear. And from there, I had kids emailing me the first night being like, I just read your game manual back to back. There's 2 spelling mistakes here. Is that bonus marks? Like, was that hidden Easter eggs? What do I do with this? I know what every item does. And all of a sudden I just was like, oh my God, I'm onto something. This is it. Like, none of this is what I said to do. I didn't even know that there were spelling mistakes. And then I started saying, oh, you've uncovered a secret Easter egg. Yes, you'll get a bonus card tomorrow. And then it just became this like thing where once it gets rolling, it builds so much momentum that there's no one that's going to stand in the way and say no. So, I mean, I have a story where one time I was told to stop doing something, and I was just like, you go tell them, because I'm not telling them. And they're like, well, I don't want to tell them. You tell them. And I'm like, I will not, because I don't agree with the fact that we should stop doing this.
Right.
And the best part for me was that eventually they were like, okay, fine, you can just do it. And we don't listen to kids enough. If you want to know who knows best, it's the kids that you're trying to teach. That's who knows best. They're the ones that have to do it. And if you just give them the opportunity in which to express themselves and be a part of it, and go in and try things out and give you the feedback. If you can check your ego at the door as a teacher or as an administrator and just say, what are the kids saying about this? What are the parents saying about this? Everyone likes it. Why the hell would you stop it?
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And, I think that, a lot of people are afraid of that. And I think the administration's afraid to take the risks as well sometimes. But I know personally, I only hear good things from parents, and kids usually when it, some kids want the structure, the comfort of grades in a traditional classroom, especially the really high flyers. They really want you to just give them a worksheet or a textbook and leave them alone, because they know how that works. And they're not asked to think as much as they would in a class where it really revolves around them having to think critically and outside the box and work with others. So I think I've gotten more pushback from high level students than I have from like anybody else. I don't know if you've had that experience as well.
Well, my thing is,
don't make me do that. Give me a worksheet.
Well, see, and my thing is, I'm like, no, because that means that you don't think that you can do anything that's not simplistic. So I said, are you really as smart as you think you are?
Exactly.
And sometimes kids get really mad at that comment. And I'm like, so that just means that I've touched a nerve on something that you believe. And you know what? You're super capable of figuring this out. I do not need to give you steps 1 through 10 about how to figure this out. I just need you to know that by step 10, this person's got to be alive, because at step 9, they can't take the acid or the base. They have to find the one that has water in it. I don't care how you figure that out. You have to design the safety things. You have to do the test. You have to figure that stuff out. But if I tell you on a worksheet what to do step by step, and then you present it back to me, like I've mentioned before, that tells me nothing about your ability to learn. What it tells me is that you're really good at following direction. Sure, who cares? In reality, so I really like to push kids out of their comfort zone, and I like to push parents out of their comfort zone, because I get an email or two every year, despite the fact that this is kind of a known thing in my district and in my school about what I do. There's always a parent or two who's like, oh, my kid's not going to be good at this. And I'm like, just go away for 30 days. And on day 31, tell me what happens. And, by day 5, I get an email. They're like, okay, this is fine. All my kid talks about is science. And I'm like, see, you just have to trust your kid. You have to trust the fact that just because school doesn't look the way it did for you, then it doesn't mean that they're not learning. Exactly. If you want your kid to be an engineer because you're an engineer, because I don't give them engineering worksheets in grade 8 doesn't mean that their life is going to be over. And in the beginning, someone said, I wish more people would be brave enough. One of the things that you got to realize is that when you exude confidence and you show that what you're doing, you believe in it and you see the results, it's way better. When you're like, well, I know you might be apprehensive and I know that this and I know that, then you're going to create that false sense of insecurity in people who are already insecure or doubt the idea. So it's why I've become kind of a bit brash or outspoken about it, because when I see people who knock it without having any experience in it, it bothers me. It's like that classic, don't judge a book by its cover. The cover might look terrible, but it could be the best book ever. Like, I'll give you like a classic example. I'm watching a TV series from a few years ago called The Man in the High Castle, and I'm just in love with it. It's just phenomenal. It's what the world would look like if the Germans had won the war, and how the United States is divided between Japan on the west and New York on the east, which is the Nazi Reich. And there was this thing that happens at the end of season 3 or the end of season 2, and I was just like, oh my God, why would they do that? That's so stupid. And season 3, I watched in like 2 days. I stayed up to like ungodly hours because it was so captivating how they did it. And it was just this mini lesson for me just a few days ago of like, you tell people not to judge and you just did it. Don't be a hypocrite. It ended up being awesome. And that's kind of the mentality I want people to say. Like, I have a quote I use in my presentations about a playwright who was really known for kind of crazy plays. And essentially his quote, and I'm going to misquote it, so I'll just kind of paraphrase, but it's like, he said, I'm willing to swim out to different islands knowing I have the home base to my home island to swim back to. So he's like, I know what people want to see in theater and in my plays, but I'm going to try something crazy and try to build a new house on a new island. And if people don't like it, I'll just dismantle the house and go back. But then if people like it, I've got 2 places I can go, and then so on and so forth. Yep. So I throw everything at kids, and what works and what doesn't. And some years certain groups take certain activities or things better than others. And that's fine, because there's no silver bullet to education. There's no silver bullet to 2 people. No. So you might as well find what works generally speaking, and then you add elements. And this as someone who gamifies, cards are going to attract more people. Game boards are going to attract more people. Currency is going to attract more people. And then eventually, as they get comfortable with what they like, they're now surrounded by different ways to get what they like. And then they're like, oh, that was cool. I kind of like that element. And then it naturally just webs out and people become excited about it. And again, right, the misconception is everything at once, and you do not have to do that. If you do everything at once, you'll have kids done by Christmas because there's nothing to look forward to.
Yeah. And, it's kind of like the, throw it on the wall and see what sticks sometimes too.
Mm-hmm.
And I also tell people, I'm like, regardless of what you do and how you do it, like if you fail or not, it's still going to be better than what you were doing. One. And two, kids will respect you for taking a risk and trying something different. I find more kids are very accepting of, kids know what beta testers are. A lot of times they'll be like, all right, guys, we're doing a beta test on this game, right? And we go in and, we try a new lesson or try a new game, and we see what it's like, and they enjoy it and they respect that. And anything that you try to do is better than probably what you were doing before. Because you're more engaged, you thought about it, you're thinking about lesson planning, and that idea of you as a teacher thinking, your curriculum as well as thinking engagement will make your lessons and your relationship with students better.
Right. And I think to kind of piggyback off what you're saying is you can't expect kids to do things you're not willing to do yourself. So if I can't teach kids how to add, and I'm unwilling to learn a new technique to add, but I expect the kids to do it all, what message are you actually sending to them about the importance of what you're doing or the importance of the thing that you're stressing? So I tell kids all the time, I was up till 2 a.m. trying to figure this out. Might not work. That's cool though. All right. Okay. You ready to go? Okay, let's go. And then one kid will be like, that was good, except that was dumb. And I'm like, that was dumb, wasn't it? How should I fix it? And they're like, oh, I would do this. And so then I'm like, okay, cool. Thanks for the feedback. Next class, make that addition. Hey, this was cool, but this was dumb, but this guy said to fix it. Is that better? And they're like, yeah, that was good. I would change this. And when you have that kind of give and take, that ebb and flow with your class, they'll do things that'll just blow you out of the water. But when you are rigid in your beliefs, rigid in your expectations, and rigid that every kid can be painted with the same brush, you might as well quit teaching, because the stress of it'll break you.
Yep. And good question by, the Psychoon was asking, how does gamification work in like an asynchronous environment? So I know a lot of people are like, especially at the upper levels in college and university, are asynchronous right now. How would gamification look in that kind of environment that's asynchronous, not even like in a Zoom face-to-face?
Yeah. So the interesting part here is you got to try to figure out elements that can be done while you're in and while you're out. So you have to give a reason to show up to your online things. You have to figure out a reason to go to the in-class things. You have to figure out a reason to be working with people while you're online, or paying attention to online while you're in school. And when you do those types of things, when you do games, when you partner somebody up, in class with a Zoom student, or you're doing a discussion board or exchange or anything like that, you have to give purpose, rhyme, and reason to what you're doing. So you have to connect the kids' ideas and thoughts to what's going on in the class, and make sure that a kid drifting out and not paying attention in your asynchronous portion online doesn't get the advantage of being able to do that. It's actually a disadvantage to the person that they're working with. There's a great follow on Twitter. If you look, I don't remember what her tag is, but her name's Allison Godwin, and she's a prof that taught me in university. And she reached out to me 2 years ago and was like, hey, I want to do gamification in university. So she's doing full-fledged gamification with game boards like I do, for kids who are not kids, for adults who are 21 to 23 years old. And this year she laughed. She's into cross-country skiing, and she has a bunch of Duplo kids Lego stuff. And she said one of the things, she has these tiny, tiny little mittens that these Duplo cross-country skiers wear. And what she did was, if it snows in real life, so your character doesn't take cold damage, you have to have on your body physically these tiny little Duplo mittens. And if you forget them, you take damage. And if you're asynchronous, you have to check the weather if you're not even in the city where the classes are. So if you're doing it remotely from like, city A, but the universities in city B, they have to check the weather to see if it's raining or snowing or whatever, and use and show on their screen that they have them with them. And she's like, it is ridiculous how kids, again, I keep calling them kids, how adults are so captivated by this. And she's like, she has never been able to get more out of her students or more creative responses out of her students simply by just making it more engaging. And she's like, I'm talking like year 3, year 4 university people, like the end of finishing their degrees. And I've got them, doing all this insane stuff, playing boards. She took her camera and she, in essence, put it above a board. So it was a top-down view. So she just built like this boom arm with wood and put a thing over it. So that's how they play their virtual game board. But it's not virtual, it's real. She moves the pieces when they tell her what to do. I've got a video that I'm going to be creating soon with this little gimbal and this will be a secret preview, I guess, for your channel, where I'm actually going to strap this to my chest and use my phone. So it's all sensitive, all stable with the gimbal, and it's going to look like a first person perspective. And I'm going to use my AirPods so you don't see them. And the kids are going to make me escape a breakout room that I'm building in my house. And they're going to control me like a video game. So I'm going to wake up and act and be like, where am I? What's going on? Like, guy. And then they're going to talk to me and I'm going to pretend like I don't know what's going on. And they're going to tell me what to do. They're going to control me like a video game. And they're going to have to tell me, go here, go there, open this, crack this puzzle, punch this into the keyboard that you see there. You use the light on this. And they're going to tell me what to do. And
That's cool.
I'm really looking forward to trying it. So it's like my human video game thing that I'm going to try soon.
I want to see how that turns out. That is like crazy. That is crazy.
My goal when I do it, and it's going to be during school hours, so it might be tricky for people, but I'm going to do it live on a live stream. So they'll be watching it happen. And just kind of gauge. I have no clue how it's going to work, but I was doing some demos to see what it would look like, and it looks pretty neat.
So it'll look neat, but see if they can actually get you to escape. That'll be the trick. And I think one of the things I did an a digital escape room today with my students, and one of my own kids did one in class, and she was like, yeah, I was in the only group that escaped, out of like 5. And I'm like, that actually sounds about right. Like when I do, like breakouts and things like that, I usually have so few groups actually get to the end, finish it. And so that was one of those weird things when I first started doing. I'm like, am I supposed to have this low of a level of completion of these? So you're going to the next level. It's like, okay, for you, I'd be so afraid that I would have some kind of bias built in to wanting to get through all the puzzle pieces, that
I'm literally, my goal is it's going to be like a puppet on a string, right? I'm only going to do what they say.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hard because I'm going to be like, guys, this is not the code. You're wasting. Oh my God.
I know. It's like my brain would be going crazy. Like thinking, okay, can't say anything. God.
That's right.
I think it would be better if we went over to the other side.
Does anybody see this drawer that we haven't opened? Well, sadly, man, I gotta do the dad thing. If you ever need someone in the future, I'll plan my time better.
That's okay. Yeah, definitely. We'll have some more talks on gamification. I mean, you're like a kindred spirit. You're 8th grade science teacher and you do gamification. I mean, so I'm like, other than the fact, and we're both Scott, so that's the double whammy. We're like, twins, and I have relatives that are Canadian, so
there we go. We might as well be the same person.
I know. So it's kind of funny, but yeah, awesome having you on here today. I appreciate it. If anyone that's on there didn't, check out, Scott yet, please do so. And I have, his links and everything. Check out his TED Talk, all of that. So much good stuff, so much good stuff.
For sure. Well, thanks for having me.
I know I'm like pumped to like try some more cool stuff this year, even with the horde situation that we're in. I'm kind of, you helped me get a little more motivated to try some new things and get out there. So I encourage you,
For sure.
teachers, get out there, do it.
Yep, that's my goal.
Change.
The worst thing that's going to happen is it's not going to work, and then you're going to go back and try it again.
Yep, but you'll still have fun in the process, regardless of whether it works or not.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely
awesome. Just a quick shout out. I got 2 shout outs, and I can let you take off, and I can do this on a more personal level if you want. If you need to get
for sure. Yeah, I can hear the stomping upstairs, which is, I better get there.
All right. So
all right. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you being here. Take care.
All right. Take care.
Bye. And for you guys, let's go over the next set of chats. We got some awesome stuff coming up, and I'm really looking forward to some of the stuff that we have. I'm going to put up a link to the slide for the next couple weeks here, so we can take a look at what is going on in the future. So here we go. So we just finished up. Scott Hebert was here. On the 9th next week, we got Tammy Giovaleni. So that's going to be awesome. We're talking about global water quality, local human connections to water, which is really dear to my heart. My school is what used to be right on the Hudson River. Now it's just up the hill a little bit from the Hudson River. So we are very connected, or should be very connected, to the water of the beautiful Hudson River Valley. So that's going to be a great conversation on the 9th, and talking evolution sloths on the 16th with Brian, 23rd climate change and sustainability with Kim, and at the end of the month, David Trossman will be here to talk about oceanography, displacement of communities as we deal with climate change. So a lot of climate change coming up as we look forward to a glorious 2021. So some fantastic chats coming up. Please get the word out if you know someone that would want to be on here and chat about science and science education. Then please get them my information, have them stop by, give me a message, and it will be a wonderful time talking to them as well. So please get the word out. Yes, can't wait to catch more. Thank you for being here, Site Queen. Appreciate it. I know Uncle Bill was here, a little bit lurking, probably in one of his 20 tabs he has open, trying to listen to at least 7 of them to get those views up. I appreciate it. So, but that is it for tonight. Friday, we have the gaming stream, and I have another event that's coming up. I will be trying to do a playthrough of Subnautica. That will probably not be this Friday. I'm probably going to promote that for the next Friday. I know I have some students that really want me to play Subnautica, so I'm going to get that and do a playthrough of that starting in mid-December. So not this week, but next week. So other cool stuff going on. It's going to be awesome. But thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Take care. Do good work. Be kind to each other. Bye.